Muy buenas noches a todos. Estamos esperando que se conecten todos los participantes de esta noche al webinar. Damos la palabra a Isaac Axen de Diariojudio para la bienvenida. Bienvenidos, muy buenas noches.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Nos da mucho gusto que nos acompañen en esta interesante plática de Diariojudio junto con y agradecerle a todas las comunidades que están participando. Monte Sinai con su programa de gira Monte Sinai, a Maguen David, a la Keilash Kenazí, que además nos está sirviendo de plataforma para transmitir eso, a los cuales les agradecemos mucho, a la comunidad sefaradí, ¿sí? Al Instituto de Bienestar Integral, sin los cuales no sería posible hacer esto y que son parte de todo lo que es el programa de Tal Ben Shahar, a la Federación Femenina de la Comunidad Judía de México, también aquí presentes. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Hoy la plática, para que tengan idea, estará moderada por el inconfundible y gran amigo nuestro, Emilio, el contador público Emilio Penjos Mugravi. Para los que no han estado en un seminario web en este sentido y quieran hacer preguntas, les comento que en la barra de abajo de herramientas de su pantalla tienen una parte que dice Question and Answer QA, donde pueden hacer preguntas, o en el chat donde pueden mandar algunos comentarios y todo, o también en las transmisiones que estamos teniendo a través del Facebook de Diario Judío y de todas las comunidades participantes. También les comentamos que tenemos una traducción simultánea, la cual pueden escuchar si ustedes escogen el canal de español. Abajo a la derecha en su pantalla también aparece como un mundito en el cual aprietan y se puede ir para todo esto. Trataremos de que en esta sección se comenten todas las preguntas y todo, pero si no, también les podemos decir que podrán enviar algunas preguntas al chat de informes@ibi.mx. Se los estaremos repitiendo a lo largo del día. Quiero presentarles a nuestros ponentes, ¿sí?
Isaac, nada más prende tu cámara si nos haces favor.
Perdonen ustedes, ¿eh? Estamos muy contentos hoy de contar con la presencia de Arlen Solodkin. Es fundadora y directora del Instituto de Bienestar Integral, organización que ofrece programas en psicología positiva, muy importante en estos días, y bienestar integral para el mundo de habla hispana. Arlen es profesora en el certificado en estudios de la felicidad, creado por el doctor Tal Ben Shahar, al cual tendremos hoy el placer de escuchar. Trabaja con numerosas universidades y organizaciones en el desarrollo curricular y entrenamiento de diversos programas en liderazgo, responsabilidad social, bienestar integral y psicología positiva. Arlen tiene una maestría en psicología positiva aplicada de la Universidad de Pensilvania. Arlen, te dejo para que nos presentes hoy a nuestro extraordinario ponente.
Muchísimas gracias, Isaac, Emilio y todas las comunidades e instituciones que hicieron esto posible el día de hoy. Es un placer para nosotros compartir este espacio con Tal Ben Shahar, líder en el campo de estudios de la felicidad. Tal fue profesor del curso más popular en la historia de la Universidad de Harvard, autor de numerosos bestsellers que se han traducido en más de 25 idiomas. Tal es cofundador de Happiness Studies Academy, creador y profesor del Certificado en Estudios de la Felicidad y el Happier Schools Program que ofrecemos a través del Instituto para el Mundo de Habla Hispana. Además de fundar Happiness Studies Academy, Tal también es cofundador de Potential Life y de Happier TV. Me da un inmenso gusto presentarlo nuevamente con nosotros. Soy testigo de las enseñanzas de Tal y de la transformación que las personas tienen a nivel personal, así como a nivel organizacional, alrededor de todo el mundo. Y su visión acerca de la revolución de la felicidad justamente es uno de los recursos más importantes que tenemos hoy en el mundo para poder transitar momentos de adversidad y cultivar una vida con sentido, con generosidad y que valga la pena. Tal, on behalf of all the organizers and our wonderful community, thank you so much for sharing with us your wisdom, your vision, and your beautiful heart. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Arlen. Thank you all for inviting me. I so wish I could visit your community in person, but given the state of our world, this will have to do.
Yes, hopefully soon, Tal.
Thank you for being here, Tal. I want to start this conference talk with you with two questions. The first one is, what is happening? What is happiness for you? And the second one is, that it has to be with the same. In these times that we are suffering from the COVID, we are suffering for not able to be with our parents, with our family, with all our people. What is going to happen with happiness? Is happiness really a matter now, or it's health, or what is now? And how can we, all of us, be happy?
Yeah, you know, these are two very important questions. And of course, they are connected because many people think that happiness is simply about feeling good.
No.
It's about putting a smile on your face. You know, they say, when I go to the beach, I'm happy, or when I have ice cream, I'm happy. But that, of course, doesn't capture the essence of happiness. Happiness is about living a full and fulfilling life. It means living a meaningful life. It means living a life that is healthy in terms of nutrition, in terms of exercise. It means living a life where we learn, where we learn new things and are curious. It means cultivating relationships, and it means also dealing with painful emotions. The question, though, that you asked is a question that, of course, many people ask during this time, and that is, what is the relevance of happiness when we're going through difficulties and hardships, and when there is so much uncertainty? You know, one of my Israeli friends actually just recently said to me, Tal, shouldn't we quarantine happiness for a while? Shouldn't we put it on the side until the situation gets better? In other words, is it really relevant for what we're going through now? And the answer is an emphatic yes. It is very relevant for what we're going through right now. And let me explain. So yes, when things are going well, happiness can help us do even better. So if, let's say, I'm at a 3, I can get to a 5. Great. But when things are not going well, when we are in the negative, when we're experiencing anxiety because of the current pandemic, when we are experiencing anxiety because of the economic situation, when we're experiencing frustration because of the uncertainty, what is the relevance of happiness? The relevance of happiness is that it can help us better deal with the hardship. You see, there's a lot of talk today about the importance of being resilient. What is resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back. Resilience is actually a term that comes from engineering. So when you have a certain material that you put pressure on, that you put stress on, if it's resilient, it will go back to its original form. Or if you have a ball, you bounce it. If it's resilient, it will bounce back up. This is resilience. What happiness studies is all about is what I've come to call resilience 2.0, or what Nassim Taleb, who is a Lebanese professor from New York University, calls anti-fragility. What is anti-fragility? Anti-fragility is about something, whether it's material or a person or an organization, growing stronger, better, healthier as a result of stress. So if resilience 1.0 is the ball bouncing back to where it was before, resilience 2.0 or anti-fragility is about the ball bouncing higher than it was before. You can think about this in the physical context, where you see an anti-fragile process. I go to the gym and I lift weights. I'm putting pressure, stress on my muscles. As a result of the pressure and stress, after I take some time off, the muscles don't just go back to where they were before. I actually become stronger, healthier than I was before. That's anti-fragility. The stress actually helped me grow stronger. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, described anti-fragility when he said, if it doesn't kill me, it will make me stronger. What happiness studies does is it puts the conditions in place. It provides us with evidence-based tools and techniques that can help us become anti-fragile. And when I say us, I mean us as individuals, as parents, as families, as organizations, and as communities. These are the questions that are asked and answered based on science by happiness studies. There's a very important term that I want to share with you that describes an anti-fragile process that is essentially resilience 2.0. The term is Ptg. You know, I ask the students in my class, and most of the students, not all, but most of them are psychology majors. I ask them to put their hand up if they have heard of PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Almost all hands in the class go up because they've studied it in Introduction to Psychology, or they've read about it in the newspaper. It's a phrase, a term that most people have heard about, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And then I asked them, have you heard of Ptg? Again, most of my students are psychologists. Almost nobody puts their hand up. What is Ptg? Ptg is post-traumatic growth. Now, post-traumatic growth, in other words, development, growth after trauma, is as likely and potentially more likely than post-traumatic stress disorder, than falling down after trauma. In other words, growing stronger and better and happier after trauma potentially is more common than growing weaker and suffering in the long term as a result of trauma. If, and this is a big if, first and foremost, we know about the possibility of post-traumatic growth. You see, most people don't even know that it's a possibility. And not knowing that it's a possibility means that they're less likely to experience it. So we have thousands and millions and billions of people today going through a society-wide trauma, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the economic situation, the uncertainty. And most people have the potential to grow as a result of this society-wide trauma. But that potential to grow is not realized, is not made real, because most people don't even know about that possibility, that Ptg is more likely than PTSD, that growth is more likely than deterioration. So just knowing that in and of itself is an important condition. In addition to that, there are also other evidence-based scientific conditions that we can put in place and that we will talk about over the next hour or so, that we can introduce into our lives, once again, as individuals, as families, as communities, organizations, that we can introduce that increases the likelihood of growth. You know, the possibility of growth from trauma, from hardship, from difficulties, also has roots in our languages. And I want to share with you a word from my mother tongue. You know, my mother tongue is not English. It's unfortunately not Spanish either. My mother tongue is Hebrew. Hebrew is the language of the Bible. Well, a biblical word, an ancient word, is the word for crisis. The word for crisis or for trauma. That word in Hebrew is mashber. Mashber, you would spell it, if you would spell it in Roman letters, M-A-S-H-B-E-R, mashber. So that's crisis. But the word mashber has another meaning. Once again, from the Bible. The meaning of the word mashber is the seat, the chair that a woman sits on when she gives birth. It's the name of the seat that a woman sits on when she gives birth. So in one word, there is crisis, and there is also the origin of life, an opportunity for birth. And this is the essence of most crises. Yes, it's difficult, it's painful, it's hard. There are uncertainties involved in a crisis. And yet there is also an opportunity for birth, for something new, for growing, for developing. And it is the science of happiness that can help us take a mashber, can help us take a crisis, can help us take a trauma, whether it's a personal one or a global societal one. And it can help us grow, learn, develop from it. So I'm very excited to be spending the next hour with you discussing how collectively as well as individually we can grow, learn, and become even a little bit happier as a result of all that we're going through now.
Thank you very much, Tal. My name is Emilio Penjos. I'm very proud to interview you and have this talk with you this night. I will want to start with the first question. The human beings are always, or some of us, looking for perfection. Why the perfection make us so unhappy?
You know, a few years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, a book came out by the name The Secret. And it's been translated into Spanish and Hebrew and dozens of languages. It was a very big bestseller all over the world. And ever since the book came out, people have been asking me, Tal, what is your secret to happiness? And I say to them, come on, I don't have a secret to happiness. You know, I'm an academic. I'm not some new age or a self-help guy. There's no secret to happiness. There are 3 secrets to happiness. And I'm going to share them with you now. Even though I wanted to keep it to the end of the program, I'll share with you at the beginning. Here are the 3 secrets to happiness. The first secret to happiness is reality. The second secret to happiness is reality. Do you want to guess, Emilio, the third secret to happiness?
I maybe know it.
Reality. So it's very hard to lead a full and fulfilling life, a happy life, if we are detached from reality. When we have the expectation of perfection, the expectation, for example, that we'll always be happy, lead a perfectly happy life, or that we will always be successful. In other words, not fail. When this is our expectation, it's an unreal expectation. Or if my expectation is that my partner and I will live a perfectly happy life, just like the life that they promise us in the movies, that's unrealistic. And when our expectations are unrealistic, when we don't adhere to the secret of happiness, reality, 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 we pay a very high price. we will inevitably be disappointed. So if I wake up in the morning and say to myself, you know, I want to have a perfect day, then as soon as there is a slight deviation from that perfection, as soon as I have maybe an argument with my partner, or something at work doesn't go well, or I try something and I fail, and these are things that happen inevitably in everyone's life. When I have these deviations from the perfect, I will be unhappy. In fact, miserable. So the expectation of perfection in terms of perfectly positive emotions, in terms of the perfect relationship, in terms of the perfect job, in terms of the perfect life, these are prescriptions for disappointment and frustration. In contrast, when we have realistic expectations, when, yes, I do want a happy life, and yet I know that a happy life means experiencing ups and downs. I know that a happy life also includes failure and sadness and disappointment and frustration. When this is my expectation, then I'm ready, then I'm open to experience the full range of human emotions and to live my life to the fullest.
Thank you. So arguing in this statement that you say about reality, I remember always when I speak with real estate people that say location, location, location. So here is reality, reality, reality. But thinking about this statement, in Silicon Valley, in the area of Stanford University, there is a quote that says, fail fast, learn faster. Is it a way to find the happiness?
You know, one of my personal mantras and something that I repeat over and over again to myself, to my children, to my students, clients, is learn to fail or fail to learn. Learn to fail or fail to learn. If you look at the most successful people in the world, and there's been a lot of research on this by Dean Simonton from the University of California and many others. If you look at the most successful people in the world, they are the ones who have failed the most. So for example, you look at Thomas Edison, arguably the most creative scientist in history. He's also failed more than any other scientist that we know of. You look at the best athletes, the sportsmen and women, they are the ones who time and again fail. They try and try again. How do we learn how to walk? By falling down. You know, imagine if our mom didn't let us fall, if she protected us so much that we would not get up. Why? Because when a baby gets up, the baby falls. Well, then we wouldn't learn how to walk. It's because we fell down that today we know how to walk. It applies to walking. It applies to learning at work. It applies to innovation. The most successful companies are companies where there is freedom to fail, where there is openness towards failure. It applies to our children. You know, one of the biggest challenges in today's world is that parents try to make it too easy for their children. They help their children too much. Why? Because they can. The thing though is that we're not helping our children when we prevent them from failing, from learning from their failures. Now, this doesn't mean that we should be all hands off. Of course, we should protect them and make sure that they're not in danger. However, short of that, we need to let them fail by themselves, try things, experiment. Maria Montessori, the great educator, once said, we shouldn't do for the child what the child can do for him or herself. In other words, let them struggle, let them fail. That's healthy.
So by that way, how do you measure the happiness? You are talking about the many times that you came up again and again and again. This is the KPI that you use for measure the happiness?
Yeah, the measurement of happiness is not necessarily the number of failures, but rather how we approach failure. You know, so whenever I start a class on this topic, I say to my students that I have two hopes for them. One is that they fail more, because the more they fail, the more they learn. But the second one is that they learn to embrace failure. Not necessarily love it, because it hurts to fail. However, embrace it in the sense of welcoming it, because it's there to help us, to teach us.
Do the optimism people, the people who is always thinking on the good, are happier than the pessimist?
Yeah, you know, I'll say something about it. I think Arlen will also be able to comment on this, since we have had conversations around this topic. So in short, people who are optimists are happier. However, optimism is not about being detached from reality. So a person who, for example, going back to my example before, says, you know, I'm optimistic, which means, you know, I'll always be happy. Or, you know, I'm optimistic, therefore I will never fail. You know, that's detached optimism. However, optimism that says, look, this is going to be hard. There are going to be failures on the way. However, with hard work, with dedication, with investment and effort, I'm going to overcome these difficulties and challenges. That's healthy, realistic optimism that's connected to reality. You know, optimism is very much connected to hope. And hope is important. You know, the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. So we all experience sadness. Right now, we all experience anxiety and frustration. The question is, do we have hope? Do we see the light at the end of the tunnel? And if we do, in other words, if we are optimistic, we're in a much better place and much more likely to overcome the sadness, the hardship, the frustration, the difficulties. And Arlen, maybe you can add your take on this, perhaps?
Well, I think it's quite impressive to think that humans have between 60 or 80,000 thoughts every day. And research says that 80% of the time we're thinking about negative thoughts, you know, negative ideas. And this is true because, you know, we are wired to be safe and to look out for danger. But then it may become a pattern for us to be focusing only on the negative side of things. And this really complicates our lives a lot because we are not chased by a big tiger every single day. So it is very important to understand that we are not talking about an illusion of optimism or thinking about just, you know, the smiley face or, you know, seeing the world through rose lenses. But we are really talking about using consciously or cultivating a view of the world that is helpful for us, that is able to really help us see through a broader perspective in order to solve the difficulties that we face in life, and also to dream bigger and to, you know, not to let the obstacles that come in the way make us fall, you know, like it is a way of building more persistence and perseverance. And the science says exactly that, Emilio, that optimistic people are those who tend to try harder, to have more perseverance. When they fail, they have a way of interpreting things that makes them grow out of difficulties. And that, I think, is what you are referring to also, Tal, in terms of the anti-fragility, where you are able to understand and reframe hardship in a way that makes you grow.
And You know, Arlene, as you're talking, I'm thinking, so during regular times, we have many more pessimistic or negative thoughts. You know, what's the situation right now when we're going through all that we're going through around the world? I mean, it's even worse. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the question is, how do we change the ratio? So how do we bring more optimism to our life? And, you know, there are some relatively straightforward techniques that we can use. The point, though, is to use them. For example, you know, to express gratitude. You know, as the first word that a Jew is asked to say in the morning is the word gratitude. Okay. There is a morning prayer, Modeh Ani, which means grateful I am. And I've always thought about it, you know, as a child when I learned it is, you know, why are they using this weird form of language? I mean, I don't say grateful I am, I say I am grateful. You know, whether I'm speaking Spanish, English, or Hebrew. But the powers that be, the people who put together the prayer, wanted the first word in the morning to be gratitude. Because when we express gratitude, that helps us shift into a more optimistic mindset. So when I express gratitude for waking up in the morning, or for a meal that I had, or for a friend that I'm seeing, or for you know, a flower that's blooming, when I express gratitude, my mindset becomes more positive. I become more optimistic. And if I do that regularly, what I'm doing is I'm shifting that ratio, Arlene, that you were talking about. Now, it's important to do it during regular days. It's even more important to do it during these times. So this is one thing that we can do to become more positive, more optimistic. Another thing that I'm actually a big fan of is distraction. To distract ourselves in a positive way. You know, usually people see distraction as something negative, but it's not necessarily. Because, you know, if I'm constantly bombarded with bad news, why not open the TV and watch a comedy and laugh a little bit, or listen to music if that is my healthy form of distraction? So having these distractions at times is important so that our mind is sprinkled with more positivity, with more optimism, in other words.
Let's talk about the same issue, the optimism and the positive thing, but in the side of the science. I am a big fan of Daniel Kahneman and Tversky, and also Richard Toller, and they won the Nobel Prize talking about that and challenging the economists about the optimism. How do you challenge the new economy that is coming with the issues of positivity and happiness?
So the question is, how do I challenge their
theory with the things that we are living now with the COVID and the happiness?
I'm not clear, Emilio, on the question. Challenge what theory of the economists? Of Thaler and Kahneman, or?
The theory that they have that the people are mostly optimism more than pessimism.
Good.
And in the way that we're living now in this situation of the COVID.
Yes. No, that's a very important question. And it's important to make this distinction. So, you know, people are optimistic about the fact that, you know, I'm not going to get sick, so I don't need to wear a mask, you know, or nothing's going to happen to me. And that's not optimism, that's detached optimism. What we're talking about here, again, is connection to reality. The biggest finding of the behavioral economists is that we're very bad statisticians, that we're not, in other words, rational. Because if we were adhering to statistics, we would have been rational. And what, again, the science of happiness says is that to fulfill our happiness as much as possible, we do need rationality. We do need to be connected to reality. So that's in the realm of statistics. This is different from the realm where we are pessimistic, which is having negative thoughts around, the world is a bad place, or I'm never going to, if I lost my job and the economy is turned down, I'm never going to find a job again. So it's when it comes to negative thoughts that we're pessimists. But when it comes to, for example, health issues, or putting on the mask, many people are unrealistic about it, and in a sense, in that respect, overly optimistic.
Thinking about the lessons that you're giving on Harvard, I believe that when you start giving the lessons there, it wasn't easier to find out that people want to study happiness. If you go to the university, maybe you think about mathematics, statistics, biology, physics. How do you get on the position of having the best lesson and the one that everybody wants to hear you? How is it possible that the people is looking for happiness in a university like that?
Yeah. When my class started, it was very small. I had 8 students, out of which 2 dropped out. So a total of 6 students. The following year, it was a bit bigger than that. And then it grew to be the biggest class at the university. And the reason was the following. So at the end of each class, students evaluate a class. And they evaluated my class, and they evaluate the instructor, and they evaluate the content, and they evaluate the the difficulty, and everything about it on a scale of 1 to 5. And the class did well, but there are many classes that do well. But at the end of the questionnaire, there is an open space where they're asked, "Do you have anything to add?" And without being prompted to do it, a very large number of students wrote, "This class changed my life." Oh. And because of that, they reported this in the course evaluation guide. Because of that, the following year, the course became the biggest at the university. Now, this didn't surprise me, because when I put together this class, it was my explicit concern. How do I create a class that I would have wanted to take when I was an undergraduate at Harvard? Because when I was an undergraduate, I wasn't happy. I seemingly had everything that one could wish for. I was a good student, I was a good athlete, I had friends. Seemingly nothing was missing, and yet I was miserable. And I didn't know why at that time. It was only later that I figured that out, when I studied positive psychology, the science of happiness. So what I did there, I put together a class that I thought would have helped me as an undergraduate, that will help those students who were 18, 19, 20 years old and struggling and not understanding why they were struggling. You see, the whole purpose of the science of happiness, the whole purpose of the work that Arlene and I do in our certificate in happiness studies is to help people become happier. It's not just to share a theory with the theory of happiness with people. It's not just to talk about interesting research. Yes, it's that too. But it's first and foremost to provide people tools and techniques. And whether you're an undergraduate at Harvard, or whether you're a graduate student at Penn, or whether you're in an organization, or whether you're a 13-year-old in school, these are tools and techniques that can help an individual, a family, a community increase levels of well-being.
I have a question about that. For example, if you find out a group of 100 people that maybe they want to get to be an architect or a doctor, maybe half of them will be architects or doctors. Maybe, I don't know the numbers, maybe you know it better. But talking about happiness, there are 7 billion people living in this world, and everybody says that they want to be happy. Why do they don't get happy? What's the issue on that?
Yeah. Again, Arlene, I'd love to hear your take on this in a moment. I'll give you my take. You know, many people have been asking me over the last, decades. So, Tal, are you happy now? Because I got into this field because I wasn't happy. So they said, well, finally now, especially now, it's been 30 years almost. Are you finally happy? And my answer to that is, I can't answer this question because I don't know that there is a point before which we're unhappy, after which we are happy. I don't think it's an either or, 0, 1. Instead, I think that happiness resides on a continuum. So today on this continuum, I'm a lot happier than I was 30 years ago. At the same time, I certainly hope that 10 years from now, I'll be happier than I am today. In other words, the question for the 7 billion or 8 billion people
8 billion.
Is, yeah, a few more came around since
the pandemic.
Yes, exactly. So the real question is, how can the people living in the world today become happier? Now, I'm not saying radically happier. I'm talking about small changes, because we need to be humble about the kind of change. Apropos being realistic. We need to be realistic about what is possible. And we can increase our happiness levels by 3%, 5%, and that's a lot, because that will have implications for so many areas in life. If you increase levels of happiness by 3%, you become more creative. You become more productive, more energetic. You actually become physically healthier. Your relationship will improve, whether at home, whether in the workplace. You will live a better life. So if we can be realistically optimistic, if we can say, here are the things that I want to do, and these are things that any one of the 8 billion, well, maybe not the babies, they don't know yet, but they don't need us, right? But anyone, any young adult and up can implement so many of these practices. And when they introduce these practices, whether it's the gratitude exercise on a regular basis, whether it's physical exercise, whether it's spending more quality time with people they care about and who care about them, and the list goes on. If we introduce these, then all of us, whether we're living in Mexico City or New York City or Ho Chi Minh City, wherever we're living, whatever culture we're from, we can introduce these practices and actually become happier, move along that continuum.
If I can add to what you just said, just because, I think that in life, people tend to get used to what they have. And we sometimes get used to the idea that things will never change, that things will remain as they are. And oftentimes also we are taught to focus on the external, like on what the mass media portrays, all of those messages that say, go get these new shoes, go get this new career, study something new, and you will eventually be happy. And we lose our contact with our own selves. And one of the things that we are bombarded with a lot of philosophies and beliefs that suffering is like the constant, it's constant in life, which is partly true, but in a way where sometimes we lose the power to really become agents of change in our own lives. And I believe something that has proven to be very powerful within positive psychology and the science of happiness is the idea of self-efficacy, which is the belief that you can actually do something to change your life and to change your surroundings. So cultivating that idea and putting it into action, I think really can contribute to lifting the levels of well-being, not only for ourselves, but also for those who struggle the most. And the individualistic society, we have moved away from a culture that is focused on, on community, to becoming more individualistic. And that has also been a real burden for people because it isolates us, and we are social beings. So the more we concentrate on, giving ourselves more and more and achieving more and more on an individual basis, isolates us. And we need to come back to the idea that giving and living in community and helping each other, it's good for everybody. And that, I think, it's a formula to increase happiness in the world.
Yes. As we're in the umbrella of the Jewish community talk, Tal, maybe it's important to talk about living in the community and what is to give. What is the job that we make every time to give, and how is that come back to us in a better way for make us happier?
Yeah, let me start by sharing one of my all-time favorite studies in psychology that talks to the idea of giving. So this was conducted, it's a joint study by Harvard Business School and the University of British Columbia. And what they did was they brought a group of people into the lab and they measured their levels of happiness. And we know how to measure levels of happiness. We do it through questionnaires, we do it through brain scans, we do it through physiological measures. So they measure their levels of happiness, and then they give them a nice sum of money. And they tell them, with that money, go and buy yourself something. So they take the money and they buy themselves a gadget, or they buy themselves shoes or whatever. And then they go back to the lab after the shopping and they measure their levels of happiness again. And what do you think they find? They find that levels of happiness go up significantly as a result of the shopping. This is important research. This is the first time in recorded history that we have scientific evidence for Carrie Bradshaw's claim from Sex and the City that buying shoes makes you happier. Now, I'm sure there are people on this listening here who are laughing, and I'm sure there are people who are crying. It's okay. All emotions are legitimate. But then they come back to the lab a day later and they measure their levels of happiness again. What do they find? So after that high, it goes right back down to where it was before. You have a shopper's high, it doesn't last 24 hours. So the conclusion from this research is that you need to buy shoes every day. Again, even more people are crying now. So, second part of this study, they bring in another group of people, different group of people. They measure their levels of happiness again. They give them the exact same amount of money. And then they tell them, like they told the first group, go spend this money. Only this time they say, go spend it on someone else. And they do. And they give it, buy meals for homeless people, or they donate it to their favorite charity, or they buy their partner shoes. It doesn't matter, but they spend it on someone else. They go back to the lab and they measure their levels of happiness again. What do they find? Spike. It goes up to the same degree as the shopper's happiness levels went up, with one very big difference. When they go back to the lab after 24 hours and they measure their levels of happiness again, it does go down, but only slightly. It's still higher than base level. They see the impact of giving even after a week. To give is to receive, one of the most powerful interventions out there for, by the way, not just increasing happiness, also for increasing self-confidence and what Arlene was talking about earlier, self-efficacy. One of the best interventions out there is to give others. In other words, making others happier also makes us happier. You know, I gave the example earlier of the word mashber, crisis. Another very meaningful word to me in Hebrew is the word to give. In Hebrew, the word to give comes from the root natan. So, you know, like the name Nathan, that's in Hebrew Natan. Again, it's a biblical word. And if you spelt it in Roman letters, it would be N-A-T-A-N. Those of you in Hebrew, it's Nun Taf Nun. So N-A-T-A-N. Now, that word is unique. How is it unique? It's a palindrome. It's symmetrical, left to right and right to left. That's no coincidence. There's a great deal of wisdom in Hebrew, in many of the ancient languages. Because when I give Natan, I'm given right back, Natan. And today we have the science, the research to show just that. Now, as we talked about earlier, it's always important to give. Just like it's always important to increase levels of positivity and gratitude. It is especially important during these times. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be much. Anne Frank, back in the 1940s, when she was 14 years old, she said, we can always give something, even if it is only kindness. And we can always give kindness. The benefit of kindness to others, to ourselves, is immense.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tal, if we take that point, and I know that Arlene is gonna like very much what I'm gonna say. So we have the objective of change the world. Do we have to make tikkun olam for making a better world for everybody? Is this a way to find happiness?
It is a way to find happiness for various reasons. One is because if my objective is to help other people and I help other people, then I do become happier. There is, of course, that benefit. There is, though, another important point here. You see, we're all tied together in a web of empathy. And when I see others suffering, I'm compelled by my nature to help others, by my moral sense to help others. I will not be able to live a full and fulfilling life if I know that there is something that I can do and I avoid it. So there is the actual pleasure and joy of giving. And there is also the strong emotion that compels me to give, without which I will be paying a price because of the interconnectedness of our nature.
Arlene, I want to add your comments on that, because I know that you make a beautiful experiment on Mexico on the way of giving in the communities. Can you add something to what Tal says, please?
Well, yes, thank you. First of all, I have to say that focusing on others is the most powerful tool to get you out of a depression. It really shifts your focus from yourself to the outside world, and it provides you with perspective. And my experience has been that sometimes a lot of individuals feel we are too little, or we are too fragile, or we are not enough to change the world or to repair the world. And my practical experience has been that there is like a ripple effect and there is echo. As soon as you have the clarity in the intention to do something for the better of society or the better of other people, a lot of people start uniting with you to make things happen. And that was the case with the story I told you about the 1 kilometer of blankets that we did several years ago, that started with a very small vision that I shared, or my mother actually shared with me. And then suddenly, after going to a small community and giving 200 blankets to people, this idea came about, and 4 years later, we were able to gather 26,000 blankets and to have, 30 schools and businesses participating in this campaign. So, we often think that the institutions are made and people with power are the ones that can actually conduct or make some progress in the world. But we should not underestimate the power each of us has in making that reality come true. So this is the passion. I think one of the most important necessities people have is to feel valued and to add value, as Pilatowski said. And really, this is the key to transformation from the inside out.
I think that you want to add something, no? Tal, about that.
Oh, very much, yes. So, Arlene, I'm very glad you brought this point up, because so many people feel powerless in the face of what is going on now, or just generally in life, where they feel helpless. What can I do, one person? So I think the best advice that I received about this is from a book from our tradition, Pirkei Avot, tradition, or the chapters of the fathers. And in the chapter of the fathers in book 2, there is a beautiful phrase there that says that it is not upon you to finish the task. In other words, you don't have to finish it all, you don't have to do it all. But then the sentence continues after it says, it's not upon you to finish the task, but neither are you free to absolve yourself from it. You're not free to reject it and not do anything about it, in other words. So don't worry about finishing it all. But at the same time, you have to start doing it. You have to do the work. And it's a very good balance here between, on the one hand, doing something, but on the other hand, being realistic about what is possible, what is attainable. We don't need to do it all, and yet we need to do it.
And can I say something that you just reminded me of? But William James, like the father of psychology, he talked about a term called betterism, which is like making the world better. And he said, in contrast to optimism, which happens in the mind, which is like a cognitive endeavor, betterism, is in the hands of every one of us. It lies in taking action, which is exactly what you're just saying. So if we want to make a better world, we of course have to wish it and see it and imagine it, but we need to take action. Without action, the world is not going to change.
Tal, in that same question, you take some points about Judaism, and we the Jews been talking about that from 3,000 years ago. But I have to ask you, where is God in that formula of happiness? How do you take your science that you make all the studies and take it together with the spiritual side?
Yeah. So to me, God is a very personal. Is a very personal God, meaning there are people whom I teach, whom I talk to, who are religious and believe in God, and they see a lot of the signs of happiness in their religion. And there are people who are atheists and can still benefit from the signs of happiness. What is important, though, and what I point out all the time, is that even if one is not religious, even if one does not believe in God, there are still many important lessons in religion. You see, there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research on religion and happiness. It was done by people like Robert Emmons and David Myers and numerous others. And what the research shows very clearly is that, in general, religious people are happier than non-religious people. Now, it's very important to point out that this is average. In other words, you find very religious people who are miserable, and you find atheists who are extremely happy. But on average, it seems that religion contributes to happiness. Now, the interesting question for scientists is why? What is it about religion that contributes to happiness? And there are a few things. So one thing I mentioned earlier, gratitude. In religion, every religion that I know of at least, gratitude is a central pillar. You know, so in Judaism, it's the first word in the morning. In Christianity, what is prayer about? It's about expressing gratitude. So gratitude certainly is an important part. There is more. In religion, community is central. This is exactly what Arlene was talking about. You know, we're not born islands. We're social beings. We're part of the whole, in the word of the Christian theologian John Donne. We're part of that whole, and we need that community. In religion, we meet the community, whether it's every, Friday night or Saturday or Sunday or during holidays. There is an emphasis on community. There's also emphasis on family in religion. Beyond that, there's also an issue of spirituality. You know, Albert Camus, the French existential philosopher, did not believe in God. He was not religious. He said the following sentence. He said, "At every moment in my life, I have to make a decision. Do I drink a cup of coffee or do I kill myself?" Why this? Again, he put it in a very extreme way, because what he meant there is that he has to invent meaning and purpose in life every moment. Whereas when there is religion and the belief in God, there is an inherent meaning in life. So religion, of course, presents it to you, makes it easier, but that doesn't mean that an atheist, a person who doesn't believe in God, cannot find meaning. For example, in giving, in helping others, in being a good person, in learning. There are many ways in which we can find meaning in life. So even if people, my point is that even if people do not adhere to religion, they should still spend time learning from the very smart people who had thought about these ideas, who cultivated a system, because religion is the most comprehensive system that humanity has to date, that talks about the good life. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to take everything as a package deal. However, to throw everything out as a package deal, that's unhealthy too.
And in that same way, you talk about relationships. And in the Torah, in the Bible, it says that God give us a ezer kenegdo, a help against us with the woman, with the wife. What is it about? What is it about to have a feedback? If we can think about that.
Yeah, so let me start fast forward a few thousand years after the Torah, the Bible, was written, to an North American philosopher, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay, beautiful essay, on friendship. And in the essay, he wrote the following. He said, "In a friend, I'm not looking for a mush of concessions. In other words, I'm not looking for a person who will agree with everything that I say. Rather, in a friend, I'm looking for a beautiful enemy. a beautiful enemy, a person who will challenge me and help me on my journey to the truth. Now, this idea of a beautiful enemy is extremely important because think about it. You don't want a yes man or a yes woman as a friend, a person who will just agree with everything that you say. You want someone that if they think that you're wrong or should be doing something differently, they will tell you because that's how they will help you. So this idea of a beautiful enemy, which was presented in the 19th century by Ralph Waldo Emerson, actually has its roots in the book of Genesis. The phrase ezer kenegdo means help as opposition. And many people have struggled with this phrase because you look at the phrase and what? I want opposition? No, I want someone who will agree with me. But the question is, really? Is that what you want? Do you want someone to help you grow and learn? Then sometimes that person will oppose you and that person will challenge you. And this is the ideal relationship, the ideal romantic relationship, as well as the ideal friendship, as well as the ideal relationship in the workplace. Because in the workplace, you don't want yes men and yes women. That's not how you create. That's not how innovation takes place. You know, many people ask, you know, why is Israel the startup nation? Why is Israel such a small country? Why is there so much innovation there? More per capita, more than any other country in the world, by far. One of the main reasons is because of this culture of help as opposition, of ezer kenegdo, of beautiful enemies. Because in Israel, part of the culture is that an employee who just started in the work, and he may just be, 23 years old, will challenge the boss who's been there for 30 years and in his 50s. This is part of the culture, and this part of the culture is extremely helpful for coming up with new ideas, for development, for growing. This is one of the conditions that lead to anti-fragility, this openness to disagreement, this openness to challenges. It leads to growth in the relationship at home with a romantic partner. It leads to growth in the organization when a team works together to solve a problem.
Tal, before we go to the questions that the people have and maybe want to be asked by Isaac Ahsen, I want to ask you the last thing in this conversation, that it's been a great pleasure to talk with you. Give me your advice. How do we learn to be happy? What's the point that we have to have as crucial points in our agenda to be living happy ever after, if you want to say it like that?
Okay, I don't know about the ever after, but I'll give you just in this life. I don't know what's going to happen later, and I'm not eager to find out anytime soon. And Arlene, if you can add, one or two of your own, that would be great too. So let me share the most important thing, the number one predictor of happiness. It's quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us, relationships. Now, this is easier said than done, especially today, when we are, some of us are quarantined, social distancing. I've never in my life been away from my parents for as long as I have been now. That's hard. I haven't seen many of my friends that I usually see regularly for months. What do you do in this situation? Because normally I would say, get together with friends, spend time, have meals together, celebrate the holidays, celebrate every day. Today, it's not possible. What do you do? So instead of thinking about real versus virtual relationships, I urge people to think about superficial versus deep relationships. Because, I can have a relationship, a WhatsApp relationship. So how are you, what's up, you know, send a few emojis and LOL. Or I can call up someone and really talk to them for an hour, or go on Zoom and really interact with them, or, you know, have lunch with my parents and my children, their grandchildren, and really spend quality time. It's not ideal. I wish we could be together and hug each other. Not perfect, but it's a lot better than superficial interactions. So focusing on deep relationships now. Part of those deep relationships, of course, is giving, helping, listening. What people need more than anything now is to be listened to. Also to listen to others so that they know that they are not alone. So creating those deep relationships is important. Another thing, physical exercise. I mentioned it earlier, but you know, we have no excuse to not exercise. There's a book, a very powerful book by a man by the name of Rami Harpaz. He was an Israeli prisoner of war, and he spent years in the Egyptian prison, and he was in solitary confinement. And he was confined to a small cell, which was 3 meters by 3 meters, where he had his bed there, he had a chair there, and he had his, you know, the restrooms in that room. That's all he had for years. And he wrote about this. And he said the thing that kept him sane during all those years was that every day he would exercise. How? He would walk in a figure 8 around this tiny 3 by 3 meter room 600 times every day. And that kept him sane. Now, if Rami Harpaz could do it, we can do it, even if we are in quarantine, even if we are in a small space. Exercise is key to well-being, always, especially during these times. And the final thing that I would say is accept the fact that it's hard. Accept the fact that it's challenging. Give yourself the permission to be human. You know, often during this period, I experience a low. And then what I do is I write in my journal, or I talk to my wife about it, or talk to a dear friend about what I'm going through, or talk to my children about it, because I don't want them to think that they need to be happy all the time. So going through difficulties and hardships, it's natural, certainly natural during the times that we're going through right now. It's okay not to be okay.
Arlen, your advice that you can give to everybody about happiness, that it's a must to do it.
Well, I believe we talked about gratitude, which is extremely important, and it means also really cultivating an eye for the good that is happening in the midst of suffering, in the midst of so much uncertainty. So even enjoying a cup of coffee, even enjoying or looking out and training our brain to be able to open up to really sense what's good in the world, you know, a blue sky, some birds, something that is good, even if we have company when we lose someone we love, that company is something that we need to be able to be grateful for. And I think another very important thing is to try to understand and reframe what our role is in terms of the meaning that we get out of the things we do. Like, how do you interpret your job? How do you interpret cooking? How do you interpret being now a teacher of your children at home while you have to do everything else? So if you are able to interpret those things in a way that really enhance your existence, because you're doing it to cultivate a new life, you know, to make your child have a better life, if you are able to see your job not only as a way of getting money, but to really understand it as a way you know, to serve others, that can also enhance your happiness levels quite a lot.
Thank you very much, Arlene. And for the final part, I want to thank you, both of you. And I will give the micro to Isaac, that is going to participate all the audience with the questions that they have. We received many questions. We're going to try to give the best ones because some of them were answered during the conversation. So Isaac, please, thank you very much. Tal, Arlene, thank you very much for this part.
Tal, you say that gratitude is very important. So I want to thank, before everything, I want to thank Emilio that had to make a very big decision today to be with you. And in this way, I'm going to send a congratulations, Mazel Tov, for her daughter. Thank you. Second, I want to thank Marta Flisser, Manuel Flisser, and Daniel that are making the traduction. And thanks to them. I want to thank also Alicia Hope. I want to thank Chakra, Alberto Chakra, that is doing a very good job with this production, and all the communities for doing this possible. And of course, to Arlene and to Tal for being here with us. So the first question is, Tal, that it has been many times repeated here. Happiness, you said, it depends of us, of everybody. It doesn't depend around the people. But what happens when the circumstances doesn't help you? If there is, I don't know, you get a bad situation, you got somebody ill, you are sick. What happens with that? It doesn't depend on you, that how to be happy with that.
Yeah. You know, first of all, external circumstances and the environment matter, and they can matter a great deal. You know, I'll give you an example from the research on money and happiness. So in general, people say, and you've probably heard this, money doesn't make you happy. However, people who don't have money for food, who struggle to get food on the table or shelter, their basic needs, of course, the external circumstances are going to influence them greatly. Or take another example, you know, a person who's living in a war zone, or a person who's living under an oppressive regime. Of course, the external circumstances are going to affect their happiness. You know, I'm not going to go to a person who's living in a war zone or a person who's struggling to get food on the table and say, you know, come and study happiness and I'll make you happy. You know, meaningless. What I will try and do is help them deal with the difficulties and hardships that are external to them. In other words, knowing happiness, understanding happiness, being an expert on happiness is not a solution to everything. Having said that, when the situation is not that extreme, or sometimes even in extreme situations, and the most extreme example is what Viktor Frankl writes about and talks about. You know, he was in a concentration camp, he was in Auschwitz, and yet he was able, I wouldn't say to be happy, but to find some sense of meaning, even in his very dire and difficult situation. So going back to what Arlene said earlier, if you're able to find even a little bit of meaning in what you do, in your day-to-day, that can help to deal with difficult circumstances. In addition, one more thing. Doing all the things that we talked about, expressing gratitude or exercising or spending time with people you care about, and doing all these things consistently can help you experience external circumstances more positively. You see, reality depends on the external and on our interpretation of the external. And our interpretation becomes more positive when we do all the things that contribute to our well-being.
This is a question for Tal and for Arlene, I think so, because they are asking, can you learn to be happy, or is it something that it gives you just naturally and you have to think, or there is a way to learn about happiness and I think in your books and many other ways, because they are asking about that. What is the answer of that? How to do it?
Arlene, do you want to take that first, or do you want me to go? I'll go first. Okay. So, you know, neither Arlene nor me would be here if we didn't think that it was possible to learn to be happy. At the same time, there is also a genetic element to happiness that matters as well. You know, I always tell my students I'm the right person to teach happiness because I wasn't born with happy genes. You know, I was born with anxious genes. Goes back my family, you know, as far as I know. So genes do matter, but what genes give you is a baseline or a starting point or a potential. The question then is, what do we do with them? You know, Michael Jordan was given very good genes for basketball, but had he not practiced harder than everyone else, he wouldn't have become Michael Jordan, or the one that we know as Michael Jordan. Same for any athlete or musician or person who is happy. Now, even a person who doesn't have great genes can still improve a lot as a basketball player or as a football player or as a musician. The same with happiness. Yes, there are genes and predispositions, and some people are luckier than others when it comes to that. At the same time, we can do a lot if we put in the work. There is no way around it. We need to put in the work, invest in our relationships, invest in gratitude, exercise on a regular basis, and on and on. Arlene?
Arlene?
Yeah, well, I think that we tend to search for happiness in many places where we're not going to find it. And sometimes we need to really understand what can really help me gain access to a long-lasting happiness. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be happily ever after. There are ups and downs in life, but understanding the science behind it can really help us lift the well-being that we have. And I think one of the questions that I hear more from all of the students that we have in the certificate program has to do also with, you know, why isn't there a program where children can learn, you know, how to be loyal to themselves, how to cultivate their strengths. Education has also turned to be something more about focusing on what's wrong, what's not working, and that's a mirror of reality. So fortunately, there are some programs that UTAL have created and have made available to the world. So there is a lot to learn, both for adults from all walks of life and also for children with the aim that not to prevent them from suffering, but to give them more tools to really be able to navigate through life better equipped.
Thank you, Tal. Thank you, Arlene. It's going too fast the time now, but I have two more questions. Well, I have many questions, but for the people who are asking, you can see again this conversation, this conference in all the Facebook of Monte Sinai, Maguen David, Keilah Ashkenazi, Sefaradí, Federación Femenina, and of course Diariojudio, and it's going to be with the translation and in English for both of them, for the people who want. The question is, Tal, for two sections of the population. One, what do we have to teach the kids, the children? Arlene just talked about them, about happiness. What is happening? Happiness. What do we have? And the other one is the other extreme. To the elderly people, you talk about your parents. How to make them happy these days? It's hard just with a call of 1 hour and talking with them. What to tell them to be happy in these days that they have been in their houses for more than 4-6 months.
Yeah. So, you know, with the kids, as I mentioned briefly earlier, the message we communicate to them is not, okay, go out and rejoice and, you know, this is the time to be happy. We need to let them know that it's okay to be afraid, that it's okay to miss their friends, that it's okay to be frustrated, that it's okay to be angry. Emotions are okay. You see, there are no good or bad emotions. And this is a very important message that we need to communicate to ourselves first, and then to our children. There are no good or bad emotions. They're natural, they're part of being human. Then we need to encourage our children to exercise, to move. We need to limit screen time. Children spend way too much time in front of that screen. Now, it's more challenging now because that's how they meet their friends. You know, in the past, I could say them, you know, go and play basketball with your friends, or, you know, go out or invite friends over, but now they can't do it. So right now they're spending more time than they did before on the screen. At the same time, it's still limited. They still have to go out and exercise every day. They still have to read. They still have to spend time with family. They may be in a bad mood and they may not want to talk. You don't have to talk over dinner, but you have to spend time with us over dinner. And you have to call your grandparents on a regular basis. You have to give, to be kind. So all these things are important, and all this couched in it's okay to be not okay. It's okay to feel down and to experience hardship. Now with the elderly, it's being there for them and listening, asking for their advice, having them listen to you, because they also want to feel like they are contributing, and do the best you can given the circumstances. You know, sometimes for example, we couldn't have Passover, Seder with our families, and this is again the first time in years when we don't have it with at my parents' place, and but still, you know, we spend time together, and you know, Zoom was on, as it's on very often just during lunch, and we talk and then we don't talk, but we hang out and we feel like we're as close as we can be during these times. This is very important now. Again, depth rather than superficial. Arlene, do you have any additional?
I want to introduce Arlene just to have the final comment on this conversation, and also Tal, if you give us your final thoughts for ending this conversation. I need to. I ask Arlene to start first, please.
Yeah, well, I believe that again, making people feel valued and asking people to contribute and to add to our lives in very small and meaningful ways. We can reach out to the elders, we can reach out, you know, and teach our children to make a difference. I think happiness is about cultivating the best that we have in all of us, and to do it with a sense of self-compassion and with compassion for others, especially in difficult times, to lower the expectations that we need to be perfect, especially when we have so many stressors. As Tal mentions, you know, giving ourselves permission to be human and to have patience and to really be kind to ourselves and each other. So I think that's basically what I would like to say to close. And thank you, Emilio and Isaac, for these questions. Thank you very much.
My dear Tal, I have to tell you, you make me so happy because I wish many years ago to have this conversation so personal, so close, and ask all about happiness that I wish. So today I am a very happy person, and I want to give you number one. Thank you very much. Toda Rabba. Hope to see you here soon, and asking you to finish with a great and inspiring thought that I know you know it. You know how to do it.
No pressure, right?
No pressure.
No pressure, but I know that you know it, and really, really, I'm very grateful for that. And Toda Rabba.
Toda lechain. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. You know, this is what gives me meaning in life. So thank you. And I'd like to end with a very general point about happiness, because one of the challenges that people have about happiness is they would say something like, you know, pursuing happiness, especially during these times, isn't that a little bit selfish? Shouldn't we be thinking about other people who are struggling? And my answer to that is, when we're thinking about our happiness, we are thinking about other people. You see, there is a very clear distinction in our culture between the words selfishness and selflessness. If you go to the dictionary or the thesaurus and you look for synonyms for the words selfishness, you will find words like evil, bad, self-centered, inconsiderate. You know, no one wants to be all those things. You know, evil, bad, inconsiderate, not good. If you look at the word selfless, what you find is considerate, nice, generous, kind, moral, ethical. So there is a very clear distinction between selfishness and selflessness. And the problem is that when I pursue my happiness, this is a selfish pursuit because I'm thinking about my own happiness. So it's very important to explain what this means and what it entails. This distinction is a distinction that was created by modern philosophy, and it's an unhealthy distinction between selfishness and selflessness, between egoism and altruism, because actually these two need to go hand in hand, because we know that when we pursue our happiness, and Arlene talked about it earlier, when we pursue our own happiness, we actually become more generous and kinder. And when we help others, when we are kind and generous, we actually become happier. Natan, it's a two-way process. In other words, giving helps us, and when we help ourselves, we give more. So rather than talking about selfish and selfless, we need to talk about self-full. A self-full person is a person who's concerned about their own happiness and is concerned about the happiness of others. Rabbi Hillel, thousands of years ago, talked about this idea. He said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? In other words, he's saying, you know, be for yourself, help yourself, be selfish in that respect. Again, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And then he continues, but if I'm only for myself, who am I? In other words, if I'm only thinking about my happiness, I'm nothing. So I need to think about other people. In that, he's talking about the self-full individual, thinking about his or her own happiness and thinking about the well-being of others. And then after he says, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, who am I? He ends by saying, and if not now, then when? And this is the message that I hope you will take home with you. Now, don't even wait till tomorrow. Right now, give yourself the permission to be human. It's okay not to be okay. Right now, listen and give kindness, generosity to other people. Start exercising. Doesn't have to be tonight. but tomorrow. Express gratitude on a regular basis. Do it now so that you increase your own happiness, so that you have more to give to increase others' happiness.
Thank you very much. Isaac, close please the conversation. Thank you.
Tal, Arlen, thank you very much. I want to tell, I will say it in Spanish for the people that are not understanding. Los que quieran saber más acerca de los programas, los pueden ver en la página de IBI, www.ibi.mx, o escribir a informes@ibi.mx para todo esto. Y los que quieran, los que preguntan de si quedará grabada, claro, estará grabada en todos los Facebooks de Monte Sinai, Maguen David, la Keilah, la Comunidad y Federación Femenina y Diario Judío, como les dijimos, en español y en inglés para todo mundo. Now, like I said, I want to thank again Emilio. I'm sure that his happiness of this day is going to last more than a pair of shoes. Buying a pair of shoes. It's going to last more than that. Thank you, Tal. Thank you, Arlen. Thank you to all the people with Marta, Pleaser, Danny, Manuel. Thank you for Alicia. Thank you for Chakra. Thank you for the people in the Keile. Thank you for the Comunidad de Paradis. Thank you for Maguen David, for all the people in Monte Sinai, for all the people in Federación Femenina, and of course, all the people in Diario Judío, and in the IBI Institute, in el Instituto Integral, Instituto del Bienestar Integral, y a todos los que participaron y a todos los que nos escucharon, muchísimas gracias. Y tendremos más sorpresas con Emilio y con muchas
I need to add something. Tal, please, let me be grateful a little bit. Esta plática hubiera sido imposible de ser llevada a cabo si no hubiera sido por el trabajo arduo de juntar a todas las comunidades por un bien único, que es dar un poco de optimismo y bienestar por parte de mi querido amigo Isaac Axen, que ha hecho un trabajo fenomenal. Se lleva las palmas por esta iniciativa. Muchísimas gracias, Isaac. Gracias por la oportunidad que nos has dado de hablar y gracias por ser una persona que con tu insistencia has llevado felicidad a muchas casas judías en este momento y los demás que nos acompañan. Muchas gracias. Tal, I hope you understand it because I say thanks like 10 times.
Thank you all, and thank you for putting this together.
I'm sure this is not the last one we are going to do with you, Tal, and with you, Arlen. We're going to repeat it, and with Emilio, of course, it's going to be very interesting, and be waiting for more of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tal.
Thank you, Arlen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Isaac and Emilio.
Les pido a los ponentes si se pueden quedar al final, por favor.
Don't get out, Tal, 1 second. Sí, gracias.